Hello, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. Chapter 14, The World Discovers Wimbe. Despite the incident with the famine, my popularity as an inventor led to other opportunities. That same year, one of the teachers at Wimbe Primary asked if I'd be interested in starting a science club for the students. He was impressed by my windmill and wanted one on campus. "The students look up to you," he said. "Your skills in science will really challenge their brains." "Sure," I said. "I'll do it." The windmill I created for the school was small, much like my first radio experiment. For the blades, I used a metal maize pail, and the generator was a radio motor. I attached it to a blue gum pole and ran the wires into my old Panasonic 2-battery radio. I did this during recess one morning when all the kids were playing soccer. When I connected the wires and music blasted through the schoolyard, a small riot erupted from all the excitement. The windmill not only allowed students to listen to music and news, but they could also charge their parents' mobile phones. Each Monday, I explained to them the basics of science and gave some popular examples of simple innovation, like how ink was first made by using charcoal. I also demonstrated the cup and string experiment featured in my books to help explain how a telephone works. I walked them through the steps of how I'd built everything using everyday materials. "So many things around you are reusable," I told them. "Where others see garbage, I see opportunity." I hoped I was inspiring them in some way, because if I could teach my neighbors how to build windmills, I thought, what else could we build together?
Here?
Excuse the interruption. Say you're sorry.
Very sorry.
Sorry. In science, we invent and create, I continued. We make new things that can benefit our situation. If we can all invent something to make our lives better, we can change Malawi. I later found out that some of the students had been so inspired by the windmill, they'd gone home and made toy versions themselves. I imagined what it would be like if all those pinwheels were real. What if every home and shop in Wimbe had machines on the rooftops to catch the wind? At night, the entire valley would sparkle like a clear sky full of stars. Bringing electricity to my people no longer seemed like a madman's dream. In early November 2006, this is right around the time some of you were born, a little earlier than most though. In early November 2006, some officials from the Malawi Teacher Training Activity were inspecting the library at Wimbe Primary when they noticed my windmill in the schoolyard. They asked Miss Sikelo who had built it, and she gave them my name. One of them telephoned his boss, Dr. Hartford Mkazime, and described what he'd seen. A few days later, Dr. Mkazime drove 5 hours to Wimbe. He was even more amazed once he saw the larger windmill at my house, and he asked my father if he could speak with the boy who'd built it. "He's here," said my father, and called me from my room. Dr. Mkazime was an older man with gray hair and kind, patient eyes. But when he spoke, his command of language was large and powerful. I'd never heard anyone speak such good Chichewa, and when he spoke English, it was simply eloquent. That means he speaks well and fancy. He asked me about the windmill and how it came about. "Tell me everything," he said. I told the story as I'd done 100 times before, then took him through the house, demonstrating how my switches and the circuit breaker worked. He listened carefully, nodding his head, and asked specific questions. "These are very tiny bulbs. Why aren't you using big ones?" "I can use big ones," I said, "but the big lights require more voltage. The dynamo is only so strong." "How far did you go with your education?" "Just the first year in secondary school." "Then how did you know this stuff about voltage and power?" "I've been borrowing books from your library." "Who teaches you this stuff? Who helps you?" "No one," I said. "I've been reading and doing it alone." Dr. Mkazime went to see my parents. "You have lights in your house because of your son," he said. "What do you think of this?" "We thought he was mad," my mother said. Dr. Mkazime laughed and shook his head. "I want to tell you something," he said. "You may not realize, but your son has done an amazing thing, and this is only the beginning. You're going to see a lot more people coming here to see William Kamkwamba. I have a feeling this boy will go far. I want you to be ready." The visit left me a little confused and very excited. No one had ever asked me such questions before, and no one had taken that kind of interest. That afternoon, Dr. Mkazime returned to his office in Zomba and told his colleagues what he had seen. "This is fantastic," they said. "The whole world needs to know about this boy." "I agree," said Dr. Mkazime, "and I have just the idea." The next week, Dr. Mkazime returned to my house with a journalist from Radio 1. It was the famous Everson Masaya, whose voice I'd heard for years. He'd come to my house to interview me. "What do you call this thing?" he asked. "I'm calling it electric wind." "But how does it work?" "The blades spin and generate power from a dynamo." "And in the future, what do you want to do with this?" "I want to reach every village in Malawi so people can have lights and water." While we waited for the Radio 1 interview to air, Dr. Mkazime came with even more reporters. These men represented all the great media organizations in Malawi: Mudzi Withu and Zodiac radio channels, the Daily Times, The Nation, and Malawi News. They poured out of the car with their cameras and tape recorders and flocked around the windmill. For 2 hours, they moved through the house, elbowing and shoving one another to get the best pictures of my switches and battery system. "You've had your time, now it's my turn. Move aside, my paper is bigger." Soon our yard was filled with crowds from the trading center who'd come to gawk at the famous journalist. "Look, it's Nom Kubwi from Zodiac," they said. "Finally, we see his face. What a handsome man. And he's interviewing William." One of the reporters even climbed my tower and studied the blades and chain system, taking pictures the whole time. "Mkazime, this chap is a genius," he shouted. "Yes," he answered. "And this is the problem with our system. We're losing talent like this all the time as a result of poverty. And when we do send them back to school, it's not a good education. I'm bringing you here because I want the world to see what this boy has done, and I want them to help." Like me, Dr. Mkazime's father had also been a poor farmer who struggled to feed and clothe his family. But he knew the value of an education. At one point, when Dr. Mkazime was young, He had volunteered to drop out of school and work so his brothers could go instead. His father refused, saying, "All of my kids will stay in school. I'll do whatever it takes." It took nearly 10 years for Dr. Mikazime to complete his secondary education. He later earned degrees from universities in Malawi, America, Britain, and South Africa. Before working for the MTTA, he'd written many Malawian textbooks, including my own Standard 8 English Reader. I'm gonna do this in 2 sessions because my phone battery is about to die.